With Meghan Markle and his grandchildren, Archie and Lilibet, for the first time in 4 years. Taking place in the English countryside, Prince Harry and his father put their differences aside for the family reunion.
A car pulls up the gravel drive at Highgrove, and 47 minutes later, it pulls away again. No photographer, no balcony, no statement on palace paper. Meghan Markle arrived with the children, sat down with King Charles, and was back on the road before an hour had passed, then flew to California without her husband. Tom Bower says the clock is the story.
The king right now, his best bet would be to distance himself completely, make it clear to Harry that the Sussexes are not welcome at all in Britain.
And that the king had already decided how this would end weeks before anyone reached Gloucestershire. The withdrawn invitation, the second person in the room, the photograph that was never taken. So, what was Charles protecting? 47 minutes. Picture the afternoon as it was actually arranged. 4 adults and 2 small children in a house the children do not know. No aide in the corner, no press officer waiting by the door with an agreed line. No photographer booked for the moment, everyone stands up. Tea, a drawing room, a driver outside, and a clock. 47 minutes later, the car is moving again, and the whole thing is over. The number is what made the story travel. 47 minutes is long enough for tea and short enough to be a message, and once that figure was attached to the visit, it became a data point. Tom Bower, who has written at length on Harry and Meghan, has spent the weeks since arguing that the brevity was not accidental.
Said off camera, and I hope it's okay that I'm repeating this, Prince Harry is done. Can you expand on that?
For Harry now is downhill faster than he can imagine.
He says the length of the meeting was the clearest signal Buckingham Palace has sent since 2020 about where the Duke and Duchess of Sussex now stand. Bower is an interpreter here, not a witness. He was not in the room, the palace has not confirmed his account of the king's reasoning, and biographers who have covered the Sussexes critically for years are not neutral observers of them. Nothing in this script is a transcript. What follows is the reading of a well-sourced commentator who has been right about the direction of this relationship more often than he has been wrong, tested against what can actually be checked. And what can be checked is mostly a list of absences. No photograph was released, no joint engagement followed, no statement described the meeting as a reconciliation. In a family that communicates almost entirely through what it chooses to publish, 4 absences in a row are not silence. They are a sentence. Bower's argument is that the shape of the afternoon was set weeks earlier. It was decided around a bed in Buckingham Palace. The withdrawn invitation. This is one of the few parts of the story that played out in public rather than through briefings. Harry was reported to have been offered accommodation at Buckingham Palace during his UK visit.
Prince Harry is expected to return to the UK in September, and King Charles is reportedly extending another olive branch.
Then, with the trip already underway, a spokesperson for the Duke of Sussex confirmed the offer had been withdrawn. The confirmation came from the Sussex side, which makes it unusually solid ground in a story otherwise built on anonymous sourcing. Bower treats the withdrawal as the hinge. A night at Buckingham Palace is not hospitality in a family like this one. It is a statement of position, photographable from the road, reportable for a week, impossible to walk back afterwards. Offering it and then removing it suggests that somebody in the king's circle looked at what that image would be worth to the Sussexes and decided the price was too high. The timing is what gives the episode its weight. Withdrawing an invitation weeks in advance is administration. Withdrawing it at the last moment, with the Duke already traveling, is closer to a signal, and it guaranteed the story would break while he was in the country, rather than quietly beforehand. There is a duller explanation available, and it should not be skipped. Palace logistics genuinely are complicated. Buckingham Palace has been in the middle of a long refurbishment, and security arrangements around Harry have been contested in the courts for years. A withdrawn offer can be a scheduling failure rather than a strategic decision, and the palace has never described it as anything else. The counter is that the pattern held. If the withdrawal had been logistical, the meeting that followed would have looked normal. Instead, every subsequent element pointed the same direction. No palace, no photograph, no joint appearance, no statement. Once is an accident. 4 times in a row is a policy. Something changed between the warm first response and the 47-minute meeting, and the next chapter is where you find out what the king was protecting when he set those terms. Subscribe now so it reaches you when the rest of this story moves. The arithmetic. What changed, according to Bauer, is that Charles worked out why the trip was being pushed so hard. His answer is financial, and he does not soften it. 6 years after the exit from royal duties, the Sussex business empire has not produced the anchor project it needed. He points to a slate that has thinned rather than thickened. No returning Netflix series carrying the couple's names in the way the original deal promised. A lifestyle brand that has drawn more commentary than commercial momentum, and a charitable profile complicated by Harry's departure from Sentebale after a very public dispute with its chair.
Sentebale was founded in 2006 to help young people with HIV and AIDS. Prince Harry resigned as a patron in March 2025 after a public disagreement with its chair.
Security, mortgages, and the ordinary running costs of a Montecito life do not pause while a career is repositioned. His conclusion, delivered in interviews over the summer, was that the couple can see a horizon on their current model measured in years rather than decades. That is a hard claim, and it deserves the obvious pushback. Bauer has no access to the Sussexes' accounts. Their private deals are not published, and predictions that this couple is running out of road have been made every year since 2020 without arriving. A brand that is quiet is not necessarily a brand that is failing. What is checkable is narrower and still notable. Harry did step back from Sentebale in 2025 after a bitter fallout became public. The Netflix relationship was restructured into something looser than the original headline arrangement. Neither fact proves desperation. Together, they established that the commercial picture in 2026 is not the one the couple presented to the world when they left. The interpretation begins with what that means for Meghan specifically, and this is where Bauer is most direct. Money, he argues, is not actually the scarce resource. Money can be raised or earned back. Standing cannot. Standing is the one asset that cannot be manufactured in California at any price, because it is conferred rather than bought. And the only institution able to confer it sits 4,000 miles away in London. Bauer's contention is that this is what Meghan was reportedly seeking at Highgrove. Not a role, not a salary, not a return to engagements, but recognition. Acknowledgement that the family regarded her as family in a form the outside world could see. Every commercial conversation she has entered since 2020 has carried an unspoken question about whether the Royal Association is an asset she still holds, or a chapter that has closed. A visible answer from Highgrove would have settled that question in her favor for years. What she wanted in this reading was proof. Getting into the country to ask for it required a reason nobody could criticize. Harry already had one in his diary. The Invictus Door. The Invictus Games, the competition for wounded servicemen and women that Harry founded and remains deeply identified with.
Well, Prince Harry's Invictus Games kicked off today in Orlando. The competition gives wounded veterans the chance to battle it out in various sports.
Are heading to Birmingham, with preparatory events scheduled ahead of the main competition. That gave Harry a reason to be in the UK that no one could attack, and that could not be framed as a request. Bauer is careful on this point. Harry's commitment to Invictus long predates the rift and has never been seriously questioned, even by his sharpest critics. The suggestion is not that the games are a pretext, but that a legitimate reason to be in Britain also happened to be the only vehicle available for a much larger ask. A man can care about wounded veterans and also understand that a fixture in Birmingham creates a diary entry his father would find difficult to refuse. Both things can be true at once. The larger ask was presence. A king at Birmingham, a photograph on a British stage, a visible line between the monarchy and the Sussex name that could be pointed at for a decade afterwards, in negotiations, in pitch meetings, and in whatever the next chapter of the couple's career turned out to be. An Invictus appearance by the reigning monarch would not be a private courtesy. It would be an institutional endorsement, delivered in front of cameras, with no way to qualify it afterwards. The palace in this account understood the sequence perfectly. First a visit that nobody could object to, then a meeting, then, with the relationship visibly repaired, an invitation to Birmingham that would be awkward to decline. Each step reasonable alone, the destination visible only if you looked at all of them together. Charles, by every indication, looked at all of them together, and when the meeting finally happened, he brought someone with him. The witness queen, Camilla's presence at Highgrove has been reported as one of the details that surprised the Sussex side most.
Meghan and their children close by, reunited with King Charles and Queen Camilla at their country residence, Highgrove Estate. Buckingham Palace calling it a private family meeting.
Bauer's interpretation, echoed by other royal writers, is that she was not there as a hostess. She was there as a witness. The logic is unflattering, but coherent. The central injury in this relationship, from the palace's perspective, has never been disagreement. It has been the pattern of private conversations reappearing in public form, in the Oprah interview, in the Netflix series, in Spare. If you have watched 3 private exchanges become 3 commercial products, the rational response to a 4th private exchange is to make sure a second person can describe what was actually said. There is also a practical dimension that has nothing to do with mistrust of Harry personally. Anything said in a room with one other person becomes a matter of competing recollection the moment it is disputed in print. A second family member present makes that contest much harder to start, which protects both sides rather than only one. The innocent reading is not weak either. Camilla is the king's wife. Highgrove is her home too. And a woman having tea in her own drawing room requires no strategic explanation at all. Treating her presence as surveillance may say more about the commentators than about the queen. But the innocent reading does not explain the absence of everything else. No aide taking notes, no communications secretary preparing an announcement, no plan to release a line afterwards. The meeting was structured so that the only account of it would be the family's own, and so that the family's own account would have 2 people standing behind it rather than 1. That is a house preparing for a version of events it does not control. The king brought a witness to see his son, and the one thing the room was built to prevent was the thing his son's wife most needed: the missing picture. The most valuable item available at Highgrove that afternoon was never conversation. It was a frame, Charles, Harry, Meghan, the children, one image released officially, carrying the implicit message that the rift was over. That image would have been worth more than any private assurance.
It's a royal family reunion. For the first time in 4 years, King Charles is seeing his grandchildren, 7-year-old Prince Archie and 5-year-old Princess Lilibet, joined by Prince Harry and the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle. Charles and Queen Camilla hosted the family at Highgrove House, west of London, according to Buckingham Palace.
It would have traveled instantly and functioned as a permanent credential that no interview could revoke. It did not happen. No official photograph of the Highgrove meeting was released. No informal one emerged with palace blessing, and reports since have suggested the absence was managed rather than overlooked. The competing explanation is straightforward. Private family meetings usually are private. The palace does not photograph every cup of tea Charles has with his relatives, and not releasing an image is the default rather than a decision. Except that this family has photographed reconciliations before, precisely because it understands what they are for. When the monarchy wants the public to believe a wound has closed, it produces a picture. The absence of one, in an institution that, fluent in imagery, reads less like modesty and more like refusal. It is also worth noticing what the Sussexes did not do afterwards. No image emerged from their side either, and no detailed account of the afternoon has been briefed out in the weeks since. Whatever else Highgrove was, it produced an unusual quiet from a couple whose disputes have not historically stayed private for long. There was one subject, though, on which the king's caution ran directly against his own inclination, and that was the 2 children in the room. The line, Charles held, Archie and Lilibet are the king's grandchildren, and by every reasonable account he wants to know them. Bauer's claim is that this affection was the pressure point everyone in the story understood, including the people using it. He goes further than most commentators are comfortable going, describing the dynamic in interviews as something close to leverage, a question of whether a father in his late 70s, treated for cancer, wants to see his grandchildren or not. That framing is contested and it belongs in the opinion column rather than the reporting one. Harry has said repeatedly that he wants his children to know their British family, and there is no documented evidence of any explicit demand attached to access. What Bauer argues Charles did with that pressure is the substantive part. The king reportedly allowed contact to continue while refusing to let contact become a channel. Grandchildren could visit. Grandchildren could not be the doorway through which working royal status returned. The 2 things were separated deliberately, and the meeting was designed to keep them separate. That distinction has consequences for the children themselves, who did not choose any of this. Keeping the relationship personal rather than institutional is on the most generous reading of the king's position.
The visit was very important to King Charles, who's been battling cancer.
He wants to be close to both his boys, and he's a grandfather. He hadn't seen his grandchildren since 2022, and this has caused him, we know this, the king, tremendous pain. He has wanted to see them.
The arrangement that protects them best. Behind the separation sits the calculation that drives everything else. Prince William and Catherine, by the account of essentially every royal correspondent covering the family, have no appetite for a Sussex rehabilitation. A warm public welcome from Charles would have created two competing messages inside one monarchy and weakened the position of the man who inherits it. Between his son and the institution, the king chose the institution. He did it in a way that still let him be a grandfather. That was the whole design. The turning point. Here is the part of the argument that turns the story inside out. Refusing to see Harry was never the safe option. It was the dangerous one. Consider what a refusal would have handed the Sussexes. A father who would not receive his son. A grandfather who would not meet his grandchildren. A security dispute recast as personal abandonment, with a documentary, a podcast, and a decade of interviews available to carry it. That story requires no evidence beyond an empty diary. It is emotionally unanswerable, and the palace has no mechanism for rebutting it without appearing to argue with a wounded veteran about his own family. Every previous attempt the institution has made to correct the record on Harry has ended by amplifying it. So the king took the option that removed the narrative without conceding the position. He saw them. He simply gave them nothing to publish. There was no refusal to point at, no closed door, no cruelty to dramatize, and equally no photograph, no palace stay, no joint appearance, no statement, and no restoration of standing. 47 minutes produced a family meeting that the Sussexes could not complain about and could not use. Count what actually left Highgrove with them. No security resolution, no accommodation, no public appearance beside the king. Nothing on the record describing a reconciliation. The trip meant to reset the relationship produced one private hour and a number. The strongest objection to calling this a turning point is that it may simply be a slow point. Estrangements thaw unevenly. A short first meeting after years apart is not unusual, and 47 minutes could be a beginning rather than an ending. Bauer has predicted finality in this relationship before. It is also true that the palace benefits from his reading circulating. A story in which the king acted decisively flatters the institution, and briefings tend to flow in the direction that flatters. But turning points are rarely dramatic at the time. They are moments after which the available options narrow. Before Highgrove, a negotiated half-in return was still something the Sussexes could plausibly pursue. After Highgrove, the precedent exists. A meeting on the monarchy's terms in the monarchy's house, with the monarchy's witness, producing nothing anyone could use. Which brings it back to Meghan, who is the reason the photograph mattered. Bauer's contention is that she came for the one thing she cannot obtain anywhere else and left without it. He has also claimed a list of requests was sent ahead of the trip, and that little of it was met. That claim is unverified and rests entirely on his own sourcing, and nothing about her private reaction is knowable from outside the room. What is visible is the departure. Meghan left Highgrove with 2 small children, drove away down the same gravel, and flew west to California. Harry stayed in Britain, working on the Invictus Games. One half of the couple returned to the life they built in Montecito. The other remained in the country they left, preparing an event designed to bring the family back together. That split is the image the story ends on. Whatever Highgrove was meant to repair, the couple who arrived together did not leave together. And according to Tom Bauer, that is the moment the door quietly closed. If this made the timeline clearer, subscribe so the next royal story reaches you first. And tell me in the comments, was Highgrove a genuine turning point, or just a difficult first step in a family still finding its way back?